welcome to another podcast. With us we have Callum. The war in Gaza that has fueled the situation, but we can see these protest marches taking place, especially during the weekends in various capital cities and other cities in Europe. And London has seen a lot of these marches. Have you seen any of these up close?
Well, I suppose the backdrop of this, just to mention, is the difference between Poland, where I am right now, and the UK, where I live.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did another video called Tourism in Merry Old England, where I travelled from a place in London that is statistically, according to the census, 0.0% English to a place that's 100.0% English. And you can feel the change that has happened in the UK. I mean, where I was in starting out, you can see a lot of Pakistani political flags about Imran Khan's party.
Mm-hmm. The PTI.
And you get this conversation in the West. I don't know how much in Poland, but in the UK of how wonderful it is because now we have different kinds of curry. It's like, okay, you don't think there are any risks to any of this? And that's how the conversation had always basically been going up until a few weeks ago when what happened in Israel. And since then, we've had these massive marches in London. And people are starting to wake up to, oh, maybe we don't have so much in common. There's a lot of people in London who celebrated the multiculturalism of where they live and now, in their words, live in fear of going outside. And
you even lost your Home Secretary over this issue recently, yesterday or the day before yesterday, even if I'm correct.
Yeah, so I'm not even sure what's really happened because there started being that series of protests every weekend, and it happened to coincide with Remembrance Day in the UK, which is November the 11th. And in Poland, it's Independence Day. So I booked to come out and see Independence Day before this all blew up. So whilst I've been seeing the Independence Day march in Poland and Polish flags and nationalism and patriotism here, I'm checking my phone and I'm seeing the marches in London. And I'm thinking, God, people must be at least starting to realise that there's a massive change that's happened to London. And our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, one on a long list of politicians who come along, said some things. What she said in this case is that they were hate marches. She said this because there was footage of them chanting death to the Jews.
Could be considered quite hateful.
I would have thought that would have ticked the box of acceptable things to say about a march if they were chanting that. And for that, she's been fired, from what I've seen out here. And I'm not really sure why.
And also, she was a hardliner when it came to migration. She claimed that she would take care of the problems with the dinghies coming from France with migrants. But in the end, it seemed that her hands were quite tied. She never managed to do anything about it.
Well, it's just this mash of cultural difference, because in the UK, you get these politicians who come in and say they'll do something and end up failing every single time. The litany of these people now. But seeing that take place, even after 3 weeks of these protests and massive, rising in consciousness of people in the UK that maybe multiculturalism has definitely failed. We do not have the same things in common that we thought we did, if anyone actually believed that. I don't understand how the elite in the UK still haven't got that into their heads, because everyone in the UK definitely has.
Yeah, we also saw that some of the working class, there were some football supporters out on the streets that were preparing to defend various monuments connected to World War I. So there seems to be some form of pushback from the working class, but among the elites, it's not really there yet, maybe.
There was a worry that on Remembrance Day, the pro-Palestinian guys, who don't give a damn about the cenotaph, they don't care about the wars that the UK has fought, the dead who died for them, would go and damage them or destroy them. They have in a few towns already across the West. And so, yeah, they turned up. From what I saw, there has been a little bit of scuffles. So some guys wanted to get in through one of the entrances. The police wouldn't let them, so a fight broke out. But I compared that. Okay, yeah, there's some bad actors, some people who get in fights about things that you don't need to be getting in fights about, to what I saw on the exact same day from the Palestinian side, which is fireworks being let off. Some guy was arrested for attempted murder. I mean, there's just night and day here. And then the police response in the UK is night and day as well. When you're dealing with people who are fighting you who are from the English ethnicity, get the batons out, put the helmets on, deal with it. When it's people from one of the protected groups, I mean, the police were being hit with fireworks. There was a police officer who was severely injured, and they still didn't put their helmets on.
Yeah, it would send a escalatory signal, I guess is the way that they would describe it. But you could see some of this already in 2020 when the Black Lives Matter protests migrated across the Atlantic from the US, and all of a sudden in the UK it became a political issue. And I believe that even to this day, every Premier League football match starts with the teams taking the Black Lives Matter knee before kickoff. So it's a bit curious to me knowing that the British Empire was actually the first one to abolish slavery, and this was partly what started the debate later in America that maybe we should also ban it. So the British were very early out with that, and it has now passed, I believe, 170 years, if I'm not mistaken. Why are the British so obsessed with this type of identity politics today?
I think it might be, in the case of the Black Lives Matter movement, that's just a crossover from the United States, because as you rightly say, not only were we the ones very early to abolish slavery, we were the first. And not only did we abolish it, we then went around the world bullying every other country into abolishing it. I mean, we had a force of the Royal Navy patrolling Africa, capturing slave ships and freeing the slaves. And the payment for that wasn't paid off until, I think, about 2013 or something, under David Cameron's government. We were still, every taxpayer up until that point, paid for the abolition of slavery across the Atlantic. So these people protesting, they don't know the history. They must not. Otherwise, they wouldn't understand what they're doing there.
History is being distorted. There was a movie that came out quite recently. I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically some tribe in Africa where the females were warriors, and in the movie they were somehow fighting against oppressive colonialists. But in reality, that tribe was a tribe that was living off taking other Africans as slaves until the British came around and waged a war against them to end it. But in the Hollywood version, it was completely the other way around. So I wonder how much of this self-hatred really is instilled into the British youth.
As much as you can get. I mean, we talk about the Black Lives Matter thing. I mean, in London, the Metropolitan Police were taking the knee in front of the protesters. Complete law and order in terms of professionalism utterly broke down. To side with protesters in their movement in that way was a clear vision that these people have the same guilt that you would assume someone in America would have. They were brought up on, you're white, therefore you're responsible for slavery. You need to make some kind of repayment. Even though you're born in the year 2000, doesn't make any kind of sense. But that self-hatred is throughout the entire population at this point. I mean, even as high as police officers who are in their 30s and 40s think that for some reason the British nation's history is even remotely the same as the Americans, which, again, is not even what BLM profess. Their version of American history is something far worse than reality, because, of course, it's make-believe history, frankly.
Also, the issue, naturally, apart from just Gaza itself and migration, these protests, they are tightly connected to Islam itself, because most of the people that are out protesting against Israel are not Palestinian migrants. The Palestinians are a quite small minority. These are usually either left-wing activists, people that have bought into a very far-left ideology, or is the larger pool of migrants that come from the Muslim world, and we have many Muslim countries that have part of its population has migrated to the UK in recent years. Is there this sense of a clash with Islam as an ideology, as a religion in the UK, and in what form is it visible in society?
It's hard to say right now. I mean, we've had a lot of problems with integrating populations from Muslim countries. Specifically, Pakistan comes to mind. The issue of Pakistani grooming gangs, as it's usually named, has been tough, to say the least. Never mind the terrorist attacks and things like that. The situation now seems to be that because of the issue of Israel-Palestine, it sparks a feeling in the whole Muslim world. So even all the other Muslim groups have got their activists outside protesting as well. I think it's now utterly visible. When you look at the political dialogue that was taking place 4 weeks ago, before the attacks in Israel, there was an understanding somewhat among the ruling class that maybe multiculturalism has somewhat failed. Maybe there were some problems, which is mad considering the level of problems the UK has had with integration. But after this, I think it's now pretty clear to everyone I mean, I'm not sure what's going on in number 10. They seem to be still with their heads in the sand. But everyone in the UK seems to understand that immigration has been a huge issue, specifically on this issue, because all of a sudden, some conflict in the Middle East, Israel, Gaza, most British people don't care about anything that happens in France, never mind something as far away as Gaza. But that has electrified the country. There's now a massive divide. There's people fighting each other in our capital city over wearing a poppy. That kind of divide is not something that's small, and it's been massively noticed.
I think many people outside of the UK, they don't understand how powerful a symbol the poppy is and how truly loved this day is, Remembrance Day, and all the activists that participate in selling these poppies, and the money naturally goes to veterans and the families of veterans and so on. So truly to a noble cause. But I agree that probably in number 10, they don't really understand how it is being perceived, because you fire your hardliner Home Secretary, and at the same time you hire David Cameron to come into government again, who was famous for being very liberal when it came to these issues. So, well, the prognosis has been for quite a while that the Conservatives, they don't really stand a chance in the next general election, and it doesn't look like they are making any changes that would change this situation. But we'll have to wait and see, and hopefully after the election you can come back and tell us what really happened. So thank you very much for coming, Callum.
Thanks for having me.